Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're diving into the world of social networking sites. You've sent over some really interesting research papers on their impact.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
For sure.
And it's easy to get lost in all the different opinions and everything.
Exactly. So let's try to cut through the noise.
Hmm.
Like, what are some of the big picture impacts of these platforms beyond just like, oh, they're popular?
Right.
Because let's face it, we already know these things are basically unavoidable in today's world.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. I mean, they've become so ingrained in our lives that it's almost impossible to imagine a world without them. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
One study found that like a staggering 2.82 billion people were using these platforms globally.
Wow.
That was back in 2019.
I can't even imagine what it is now.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's definitely grown.
That's a lot of connecting, or at least, attempting to connect, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating to me. It's not just about the sheer numbers of users.
Mm-hmm.
It's the nuances of how this technology is influencing us.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I find really interesting is how social networking sites can connect us globally, right?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, they can also make us feel more isolated in our own lives.
Yeah,
It's like it's a weird paradox.
It is. It's a total paradox, and it makes you wonder if like this highlight reel phenomenon plays a role in that.
Oh, absolutely.
The idea that social media is often this carefully curated version of reality, it's not the full picture.
It's definitely not the full picture.
Right.
I mean, think about it. You're scrolling through your feed, and it's just image after image of, these amazing vacations and these like picture perfect families, and everyone's like just winning at life,
Yeah.
And it's easy to compare your own life to that and be like, oh, my life is so boring, or my life's not as exciting.
Totally.
And that can really, negatively impact your self-esteem.
Especially since it's not just a few pictures here and there anymore.
Right.
It's like a constant stream
It's nonstop.
of all that curated content.
Exactly. And research actually shows this. Like, there was a study that found that Facebook users, the more time they spent browsing, they actually reported lower self-esteem, and feeling more isolated than those who didn't.
Wow.
So it's not just in your head, it's like a real thing.
That's actually kind of scary when you think about it.
It is.
I mean, this makes me think about all the times I'm like mindlessly scrolling through my feed.
Right.
And I realize at the end, I feel worse about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even realize it's happening at the time. It's like my brain is like comparing without me even realizing it.
It's subconscious, but that doesn't make it any less powerful.
No, it doesn't. And then it makes you wonder, like, are we really connecting on these platforms, or are we just performing for an audience?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Right. And it kind of leads to this bigger question of like, how is technology actually changing like what we think of as connection in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, are we trading those authentic face-to-face interactions for something, well, honestly, something less fulfilling?
That's a big question. And
Yeah.
and there's research to support that, actually. Yeah, for sure. One of the articles you shared actually used some pretty strong language to describe like the shift that's happening.
Yeah.
It talked about how, instead of actual conversations, we're just doing like online chats.
Right.
And then social gatherings are being replaced by Facebook groups.
Yeah.
And then, physical sports are turning into, just gaming apps and stuff.
Yeah. It's like we're losing something. Like those are pretty different experiences, right?
They are. It's not to say that technology is bad necessarily.
Right.
But I think it's important to recognize that online spaces like can't fully replicate those like rich offline interactions we have.
Yeah, you can't exactly replicate the feeling of, I don't know, like sharing a meal with someone through a screen, or like, spontaneously deciding to go play basketball with your friends.
Right, exactly. And it's those shared experiences, where you're physically present with other people that really allows you to connect on a deeper level. It's more visceral, it's more multisensory. And it's in those spaces where we're like physically present with other people that we also develop like those really important social skills, like, learning how to read people's body language.
Yeah.
And just like feeling a sense of belonging.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about kind of these broader trends, but like, is there one platform that you think really kind of embodies this tension. I feel like, I don't know, Instagram is the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Oh, for sure.
Because on the one hand, it's all about, visual storytelling and connecting with people who share your interests and, kind of building community. But then on the other hand, there's this like undeniable pressure to present this like picture perfect version of yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the highlight reel, like times 10.
Exactly. And I think it's such a great example because it really shows that duality,
Yeah.
Like you're constantly bombarded with these images of, perfect bodies and exotic vacations and, people who are seemingly successful without any effort whatsoever.
It's very easy to get sucked in.
It's so easy.
And then you start comparing like, your behind the scenes to everyone else's like highlight reel. And I feel like it could really like mess with your head.
Totally. And, especially for young people,
Oh my gosh.
who are already at such a sensitive age.
Yeah.
Where they're like trying to figure out who they are.
Okay.
It's really hard to separate that online world from reality.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It makes you wonder, is Instagram really helping us connect at all? Or is it just another avenue for comparison and insecurity?
Right. It's a really good question, and there actually is some research on this that's really interesting. Some studies have shown that, people are actually using Instagram to make real life friends,
Okay. Interesting.
which I thought was really interesting. So like, people who have like a very niche hobby, for example,
Okay.
they might connect online through Instagram,
Right.
but then they take that relationship offline.
Nice.
So they'll, meet up at events or gatherings that are related to that hobby.
Oh, that's cool. I hadn't actually thought about it that way.
Yeah, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, good.
These platforms can be used to connect with people,
Right.
but it's all about using them consciously and critically.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like it all comes down to how we're using them.
Exactly. And that's what I think is really, really interesting here.
Yeah.
Because it requires us to kind of look inward a little bit and think about our own motivations and behaviors online.
So instead of just like passively scrolling through whatever pops up, we should be trying to be more like active participants in creating the experience we want to have.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And that might mean being more selective about who we follow, you know?
Yeah.
Like, are there certain accounts that you follow that make you feel bad?
Sure.
Maybe unfollow those,
Yeah.
And follow more accounts that, inspire you or educate you or make you laugh.
Yeah. It's almost like we have to curate a more positive experience for ourselves intentionally.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of letting the algorithm decide, what we see.
100%. And it's not about swearing off social media altogether.
Right.
Because as we talked about, these platforms can be really valuable tools
They can't.
for connecting with people, for learning new things, even for activism.
Yeah.
So they're not all bad.
Right. So it sounds like it's all about finding that balance.
Yes, exactly. Finding that balance.
Of like not letting it take over our lives.
Yes.
But also, being open to how it can maybe enhance our lives. That reminds me actually of a quote that you shared in one of the sources from a sociologist named Eric Kleinenberg.
Okay.
And he said, most of us are unsatisfied with virtual ties that never develop into face-to-face relationships.
Right.
Building real connections requires a shared physical environment, a social infrastructure.
I love that quote because it really gets to the heart of it,
It does.
Like we crave that real in-person connection with others.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So how do we find that balance?
Yeah.
How do we leverage the benefits of these platforms
Right.
without letting them, become substitutes for that real world connection we're talking about?
Yeah.
That's a tough question. And I don't know if there is a one size fits all answer,
Right. It's about figuring out what works best for you as an individual.
So where do we even begin? I mean, we've talked about all these downsides of social media, the highlight reels, the comparisons, how it's changing, like our very idea of what it means to connect with other people. It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by it all, to be honest.
Totally. But I think the most important thing to remember is that we have agency. Like, we're not just passively consuming this stuff, We actually have the power to shape how it affects us.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah, and it starts with just being aware. Like, pay attention to how you feel when you're scrolling.
Okay.
Are you feeling inspired? Are you feeling connected? Or are you feeling jealous and insecure and just kind of drained?
Yeah, those are good questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
For sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
And once you're like more tuned in to those feelings, then you can start making like more conscious choices about how you're using it.
Right. Okay. So let's say someone is listening to this right now and they're like, okay, yeah, I want to make a change. Like, what's one thing, one concrete step they can take?
One thing I always tell people is to set boundaries. Like, maybe designate specific times of day when you're going to let yourself, be on social media.
Okay.
Or even like limit yourself to a certain number of minutes per day, whatever works for you.
I like that. It's like you're creating some healthy distance,
Exactly. Exactly. And then another thing is to be really intentional about who you're following. Like, are there certain accounts that always make you feel bad?
Okay.
Unfollow them.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep following them. Yeah. And then seek out accounts that light you up, accounts that inspire you, that teach you something new, that make you laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about being like really active and intentional about creating the experience you want to have.
Yes. 100%.
Instead of just letting it happen to you.
Exactly. And remember, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, you don't have to delete all your accounts and swear off social media forever, because these platforms can be really great tools for connection and learning and even, making a difference in the world.
Yeah, they absolutely can. It's just about finding that balance, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. Finding that sweet spot where you're using it in a way that aligns with your values and enhances your well-being, instead of detracting from it.
Instead of making you feel worse.
Right.
Yeah. So it's less about like deleting our accounts and more about like redesigning our relationship with social media almost.
Yes. I love that. Redesigning your relationship with it, because it's a relationship.
It is.
Like any other.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like it's given me a lot to think about, just personally, but also like how I use these platforms.
I've really enjoyed talking about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I hope that our listeners feel the same way. If you're feeling inspired to take a closer look at your own social media habits, remember that even small changes can make a really big difference. And that's what we're all about here. So until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and as always, keep diving deep.